going to do a quick discussion on multiplying polynomials, and then the topic you've all been waiting for, how to use the FOIL method of multiplying polynomials. In our first example, we have two monomials that are multiplied together. Now remember, when you have a number in front of a variable, it means multiplication. So this is 6 times y cubed times 3 times y to the fifth. So to multiply, you simply multiply the coefficients 6 and 3, 6 times 3, and then you multiply the variables y cubed times y to the fifth. Well, 6 times 3 is 18, and y cubed times y to the fifth, well, y appears as a factor 3 times in this part of our monomial, and it appears 5 times in this part. So y cubed times y to the fifth is equal to y to the eighth, which is our answer, 18y to the eighth. In the second example, we're multiplying a monomial, this number up front, times a trinomial. To do this, we simply distribute 4 times 3x squared plus 4 times 4x plus 4 times negative 8. The factor that we're distributing is 4, and we are multiplying 4 times each term. Simplify by multiplying 4 times 3x squared, which is 12x squared, plus 4 times 4x, which is 16x, and 4 times negative 8, which is negative 32. Remember, when you add a negative number, it's the same as subtracting. So that becomes 12x squared plus 16x minus 32 for your simplified answer. Take a moment to look at that again if you're not sure of yourself. But let's go on to the next example together. In this example, we're multiplying a binomial, 2 terms, times a trinomial, or 3 terms. Remember, we talked about 2 ways to do this. You can apply the distributive property twice. So first you're going to multiply 5x times each of the terms in parentheses, and then 3 times each of the terms in parentheses. That's our first method. So that becomes 5x times 2x squared minus 10x minus 6 plus 3 times that trinomial, which is 2x squared minus 10x minus 6. We're going to distribute the 5x first. It gives us 10x cubed minus 50x squared, because 5x times a negative 10x is negative 50x. 5x minus 5x times negative 6 is negative 30x. And then the second part of it becomes 3 times 2 is 6x squared. 3 times negative 10x is negative 30x. And 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. Now to finish, we are going to combine our like terms. So we have one term, 1x cubed term, that's 10x cubed. We have 2 terms that are to the second power. We have negative 5x, 50x squared, and we have a positive 6x squared. So when we add those two together, we get negative 44x squared. And we have 2 negative 30x terms. So we have 2x to the first terms, and we're going to add those together. Negative 30x minus 30x is negative 60x. And at the very back, we have a lonely negative 18. We'll add on. So our final answer is 10x cubed minus 44x squared minus 60x minus 18. The other way, the second method that we can use is making a grid or a lattice. So we have a binomial times a trinomial. That's 2 rows and 3 columns. And we're going to mark the trinomial up here, so that's 2x squared minus 10x minus 6. And for our columns, up and down, we'll have our binomial. We have a 5x, and we have a positive 3. This is nice. It's easier to keep track of your positives and negatives, I think. So when we begin multiplying, we have 2x squared times 5x, which is 10x cubed, 10. We have negative 10x times positive 5x, so that's negative 50x squared. And we have a negative 6 and a positive 5x, that's negative 30x. In our second row, we're multiplying our negative 2x times 3, which is 6x squared. We have 2x squared, we have 10x squared, negative 10x. Let's try that again. We have negative 10x times 3, which is negative 30x. And we have negative 6 times 3, which is negative 18. Now you can simply combine your like terms that you see here. And I see we only have one cubic, so that's 10x cubed. We have 6x squared and negative 50x squared, which again is negative 44x squared. And we have negative 30x and another negative 30x. Does that sound familiar? It should. So that's negative 60x. And then we have our standing alone negative 18. We get the same answer as we did above. We get negative 10x cubed minus 44x squared minus 60x minus 18. That's how we use the grid method of multiplication. And here's what you've been waiting for. We have our FOIL method of multiplication. This only works when you have a binomial times a binomial. The acronym FOIL stands for first, outside, inside, and last. And if you do this, if you're very artistic, you can make a nice little face. Let's see if I remember how to do this. So the F in first stands for the first term of each binomial. So that's the x and the x. And we're going to do this. X times x is x squared. The O stands for outside. The outside terms are the x and the negative 4. And we have x times negative 4, which is negative 4x. The I stands for inside. That's the terms on the inside. That's the 5 and the x. 5 times x is a positive 5x. And finally, we have the last two terms. Those are the last terms of each binomial. And I'm going to use purple for that. So that's 5 times negative 4, which is negative 20. We're almost, but not quite done. We simply have to combine our like terms right here. And we have negative 4x plus 5x, which is x. And we bring down our x squared term. We have x squared plus x minus 20, and that's our final answer. And looky here, we made a cute little face. That's our FOIL. Let's do one more with different variables. So 8m squared minus n and n squared plus 5. We're going to do our first term. So let's get it in blue since I was using blue earlier. Try it again. Okay. This was our answer to our previous problem. And we have 8m squared and m squared. Those are our first terms. And 8m squared times m squared is 8m to the 4th. Then our outside terms are in red. We're going to do 8m squared and 5 because they are on the outside of the binomials. 8m squared times 5 would be plus 40m squared. Then we do our inside terms. Be careful, there's a negative sign here, so that's negative n. Negative n times m squared is in alphabetical order negative m squared n. And then we have our last terms, which is n and 5, but it's negative n. It's negative n times 5, so that's minus 5n. This time we are finished because we do not have like terms in the middle. M squared and n squared n are not like terms. So look at here. Here's our final answer. That's all for now. And we'll start practicing. Thank you.
Staples.